men need to at least be past college age. If you're still 18, 19, you just haven't had enough life experiences for our content to resonate. But at least it's not like if someone's 21, we're going to say, oh, you're not 22. Ideally, a person is at least in their early 20s. If someone was a teenager, we would say, it's just a little premature. Our content's not going to resonate with you, but we like for men to be in their early 20s at the youngest.
Hey, it's Rocky. Welcome to Richer Soul. Today's guest is Mark Jordan, who will share the power of men's groups. Imagine it's 12 months from now, and you've achieved your major life goals. How does it feel to be in the best shape of your life? To wake up energized, excited about the day? To have great relationships and friends who support you and propel you forward? How does it feel to have an excess of money, to be able to make the choices you want? To be fearless and open to trying new adventures? Imagine being connected to the universe and it providing everything you desire. It's possible over time, and your past does not dictate your future. The only thing holding you back from this vision is you. It's time to take control of our thoughts and use them to our advantage. Welcome to Richer Soul, where we achieve our dreams and bring balance to health, wealth, relationships, time, and spirituality. If you have not had a chance to listen to episodes 1 through 9, I encourage you to go back and listen to the framework behind Richer Soul and how to create the life of your dreams. You can also find all the show notes for this episode at richersoul.com. Today, we're focused on men, but women will also get something out of today's episode. The themes apply to all of us, and it helps us to understand each other. Men have traditionally not been as social as women, and definitely not as vulnerable. This can be a game changer for relations and life. Many of the principles are the same ones we talk about here on the podcast all the time, and that's why I thought Mark would be a great guest. And this is a low barrier point of entry for any man on the fence to make a commitment and try something to move forward and improve themselves. Mark Jordan is the founder of Unravel Groups. He's an accomplished entrepreneur with a strong background in investment banking, real estate, and financial services. He's authored several books and initiated numerous impactful projects. He passionately mentors men, driving transformational growth across spiritual, relational, and vocational realms. He's a true advocate for integrity, leadership, and service. Let's meet Mark and learn from him. Welcome to Richer Soul, Mark Jordan. It's great to have you join us today.
Thank you, Rocky. I'm really looking forward to spending time with you today and catching up. So thanks for having me on the show.
You are most welcome, and I'm excited for our conversation. We always like to start at the beginning. What was it like when you were growing up, and how much did your family and school teach you about money?
Well, that's an interesting question. Interesting. My parents both graduated high school, but that's it. They didn't have any education beyond that. So got married young. My mother was 19 when I was born. So neither one of them had any real education practically or real world at that point when it came to money. And what I like to think of is what the relationship with money should look like. And then what are those practical skills associated with it? So I know one thing my mother did teach me well with respect to money was, first hard work. So you got to earn it. And then it's hard to get it. So why don't you think about saving some of it? So that's something that was really helpful. But beyond that, there weren't a ton of tools that were given to me. And I think for me, I learned a lot about money and a lot more about money in graduate school. But frankly, on a personal level, it's really just doing life, man, after graduate school that a lot of my lessons have learned, some from things that didn't do as well as I wish I had, and other just having people around me who were successful and trying to emulate them.
That's kind of interesting. I mean, it's wonderful. She at least taught you the basics, right?
Yes.
You
yes.
got to work hard.
Yep.
And to save And honestly, even if you do nothing else fancy, that'll take you a long way.
Right. Right. It really will. It really is. Work hard, and save. And then you're already way ahead of the vast majority of people.
You are. So what did you go to grad school for that you learned more about money there?
I went to my undergrad degree was in data processing and quantitative analysis, what they called it back in the day. And that was essentially an IT degree. So, and it was in the business school. So I learned a lot about IT and programming and stuff like that in undergrad. Had some great business classes, and had one really good portfolio management class in my last year of college. It was very helpful. But graduate school, I got an MBA. My focus was in entrepreneurship. So I got a really interesting exposure to how to really problem solve. That was, I think, one of the big takeaways for me in grad school, how to problem solve. And the relationship we have with money, and then how we not only orient to it, but how we spend it and invest it and save it and all that good stuff. At a high level, it's really about how are we solving these problems in our life. And graduate school gave me that high level theme, how to solve problems in a more effective way. Not perfect. And certainly, fortunately, I've grown a lot since that. But that, I think, was the first step. Was this is a problem solving adventure that you're on, and make sure you identify the problem correctly. And you're going to be way ahead of the rest of the pack in how you solve it.
I know entrepreneurship has become a trendy degree in college these days, but I didn't realize that they had MBA programs back then on it.
You're right, because when I went to graduate school in 1984 and finished in 1985, to my recollection, there were only a handful of colleges that offered a focus in the MBA program in entrepreneurship. Baylor was one. And certainly they had programs that were well thought out and developed and well formulated. And that's the reason I chose to go to Baylor, because they had a very good entrepreneurship program. And that's what I was interested in. Quick sidebar, Rocky, when I was young, part of the story on money, this is probably helpful to share this, is I don't remember the exact age. When I tell the story now, it's like I was 5 or 6 years old. I started my lawn care business. Of course, it wasn't that, but I was probably 13 or something. I was young though, and I had started a lawn care business. I was just cutting yards, man. My mother would schlep me around to neighborhoods, and I'd cut yards and actually make good money. And I actually did that. I had that business and grew it a little bit. It was still a solopreneur business for the most part, but grew it a little bit. And ultimately, all the way through graduate school, I had that lawn care business, which made a lot of money, and it served me well. And I learned a lot of practical lessons as well when it came to money, including having a client. Keep in mind, I'm at the time, like a 15-year-old kid cutting yards, list me as a creditor on their bankruptcy filing. So I learned that experience of what it means to lose out on some money to someone who files bankruptcy.
That's kind of hilarious that they did that.
Right? That's what I thought too.
But it's fun. It's true. If you go into business, especially at a young age, I think you're much more open to business lessons and money lessons. I notice when people go into business at a later age, I don't know what it is, but they tend to ignore the money. Like a lot of business owners close their eyes when it comes to the financials. They're just like, I'm going to sell more and somehow it'll all work out.
Right. You're right. That's a great point. And I remember that. The lesson I learned is prior to enlisting that, he was getting kind of sketchy with when he would pay, like, he had delay, I got this. And I remember thinking, these excuses don't sound very realistic to me. And then next thing you know, the bankruptcy, lesson learned, right? I was grateful for that lesson. And you're right. I was young, but I was so open to lessons because I got in an early age. That's a great point. I hadn't thought about that before.
Well, I think when we get older, we've already developed certain money scripts. And so if we're kind of allergic to money, even as a business owner, we don't look at it. So this is interesting. You go there for entrepreneurship, but they teach you problem solving. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned it's asking the right questions around the problem. So how do you actually determine what the real problem is? And then do you have a framework for asking questions around that?
Yeah, I think first, how do you determine the problem? I want to zoom out just a little bit and say, I really think, and this varies to some degree, of course, in age and season of life a person is in, but assuming a person is relatively early in this developing this muscle of learning to have a better relationship, a healthier relationship with money. I think the first step is you've heard the old proverb, if you walk with wise people, you grow wise. If you're a companion of fools, you suffer harm. And I think it's applicable here. You must have people around you that are wiser than you in the area. That's number one, because they're going to provide guidance. They're going to provide practical tools, steps, and point you in a direction that's more meaningful. So that's step number one. Step number two, the answer is a lot different today than it was, 30, 40 years ago, is there's so much information out there that we can get free to learn and to experience and to develop frameworks for making progress in any of our life, particularly money. And there's so many people out there. I mean, you yourself, of course, have written about it. And so I think developing a skill, which first starts with an awareness. I don't know how to ask the right questions about money. So I know that if I know that about myself, let's say I'm a young person, younger in maturity in that area, I don't know how, then I've got to start with where do I go? How can I find more information about asking better questions about money? And I would say the first question is, what is the relationship that I want to have with money? Is money going to serve me, or am I going to serve it? That's the first question I would ask if I was a young in my journey on developing what are the relationship I want to have and what's it going to look like with money. And from that, you have this kind of cascade of questions and answers that will help formulate a good vision for where you want to go in your relationship with it.
And I think most people would ask a different question, which is, how do I make more money? Or how do I even make money, right?
Right. You're exactly right. Yeah. How do I make more money? And I always tell people, because oftentimes people, they're struggling with doing everything they want to do financially, and they think the solution is to make more money. And I'm certainly all for that. But I always tell people, look, if you're having a problem with how much you have available to do with what you need to do, it's a spending problem, generally not an earning problem, because whether you're earning $1 million a year or $50,000 a year, those same habits are going to carry through. So you've got to really focus on developing the habits that will allow you to save more money, to invest more money, and then, of course, to do that appropriately. But you're right on with that.
Quite interesting. So we're going to talk about your men's group Unravel. But before we do, how did you get from that grad school to that point of starting? What occurred in that journey?
Yeah, well, certainly a lot of learning experiences, that's for sure. Not only business, but on a personal level. At a very high level, I can tell you this. This is what took me from that point in my life to the point in my life 6 years ago when I launched the first Alpha Unravel group. And it was basically my own life experience. I tend to think in terms of like, okay, what in my life right now is not working in the best way that it could be? And then that leads me to go, okay, how can I solve that? And so the early men's group that I was in tended to be more hangout groups, right? More socially oriented. And there's a place for that. And certainly, criticism's great. I developed good relationships, et cetera, et cetera. I learned, though, that as far as developing me and really making progress in sustainable and scalable ways, that wasn't happening. I was getting fed, socially, but that was really it from that standpoint. So then I this next migrated to groups that tended to be more intellectually oriented. So I was learning some great stuff intellectually. I mean, powerful, and my mind certainly grew, and I developed some great, reading habits and other habits that have served me well. But then I started to talk to friends of mine, and I go, hey, what are you experiencing in a group? Am I the only person that doesn't feel like I'm in a space that is scalable and sustainable over time and fed, and like I'm running in this race together? And I found a lot of my friends felt the same way. So Unravel Groups was an outcrop of experiencing all these different men's group over the years, and then saying, I want to have something that's kind of in the middle, something that's challenging, something that men feel like they're running a race together. Also, though, that creates a sense of community, like we're in this, we're doing life together, we're in it together. And that's what ultimately led to the group environment that we have now. And when we launched the first Alpha group back in 2016, I guess it was 2016, I think, or 2018, it was an Alpha group of 6 men, and They loved it. It was transformative. They gained, their lives were changed and made a huge difference. And then in 2022, so yeah, it was 2016, launched the first Alpha group. Had over 100 men eventually go through Unravel groups before really saying in 2022, okay, let's form a 501c3 now, and let's really see if we can scale this in a big way and reach large numbers of men.
So, can you share maybe some of the core tenets or like what is really the purpose of a man coming into this group and what are they going to get out of it?
Yeah. So, first, at a very high level, Unravel is a group that is designed to help men learn to pursue excellence in all aspects of their lives. And it's the name Unravel comes from this passage in Isaiah that talks about this experience of disintegrating before you can integrate. So you get exposed to this gap in your life, whether it be faith, family, friends, fitness, finances, whatever it is, you suddenly realize there's this big gap between where you want to be and where you are. And for most men, that creates this shame cycle of, oh my gosh, I'm a loser. I'm not really effective. There's such a gap, and they get stuck. And Unravel is meant to help show men a way to move past that, to get unstuck and say, I want to pursue excellence in all aspects of my life, not just one aspect, but all aspects of it. So we have a number of skills that we're teaching men Unravel, things like how to have crucial conversations, how to resolve conflict, how to create a vision statement for your life. If you surveyed 100 people, you might find 5 that have a well thought out vision statement for that they're actually living by, not something they just wrote in a seminar they went to, but something that they're actually living by. So we help men learn skills like those as well, that then position them to get to the end of the 12 months and go, I've made progress. One of our themes is progress, not perfection. That's hard for me because I always feel like I got to be perfect at whatever I'm doing. And it's a constant reminder that, no, we just need to make progress. That's really what it's about. So that's really some of the skills that men leave with. And they're doing it within the context of other men who are looking to accomplish the same thing.
Do you find that there are certain parts of that people struggle with more? Or is everyone just kind of unique in their own mix of all of those? They might be a bit here, they might be doing really well here, but the other parts are kind of, not there for them.
It's interesting you asked that because we have a leadership team at Unravel, some great guys that do a tremendous job in helping us, move the ball down the field in this endeavor. And we spent a lot of time going, okay, what's the persona? What's the demographic? What's the person look like who's in Unravel? And certainly demographically, it tends to be men that are between mid-20s and, mid-40s is the most common group, although we have men that are older for sure, but generally in that age group. But as far as the area of their life, it's so interesting. There is no common area. If you think about, and we just like to think in terms, I mentioned earlier, faith, family, friends, fitness, and finances. If you look at those areas, men that come into our groups, they're stuck in one or more areas of their life, but it's not the same area all the time. We don't sit in a group and go, all 6 guys are stuck in, family or their finances. And by finances, that includes vocation and everything associated with it, of course. There's not. It's just men are stuck in an area, but not a common theme on which area it is.
Interesting. So, like, what are they feeling or what are they thinking that prompts them to come looking for you? Like, what's going on in them? Because it's going to be going on internally that says, hey, I want this. Or is it more you're going to them and saying, hey, this is possible? And they're like, oh, that's what I've been missing.
Yeah, it is both, but it is more of the former. It's men who are sitting at home or sitting at work or wherever they're at. They close their eyes at night and they're lying down in bed. And when the thoughts rush into their head, a part of their life that they really feel stuck. So, and it's interesting because men that are really successful in an area of their life, and let's say more times than not, it's vocationally, they're experiencing success. And they feel like that means everything is going well and it sort of masks the other parts of their life. So it generally comes from them maybe excelling in an area, but then their wife or their girlfriend or their parents or their friends are also saying to them, hey, you're not spending time with us anymore. Or, you don't seem to be devoting the energy and time to your fitness that you once did. Or I'm noticing that, you used to be kind of a humble person. Maybe you're kind of arrogant now. Or it tends to come from people around them. They start to hear comments and they go, oh, yeah. Or they're experiencing so much pain in an area they're stuck in their life that they go, I need to do something about it. And they start to look and they come across us, or we happen to connect with them at a time that they're looking at it. Interestingly enough, the people that are hardest to reach are the people that really just feel like, oh, status quo I feel good at status quo. Whatever that is, they're just sort of going through the motions and they're not either internally feeling challenged or externally being challenged are the hardest group to reach. And I believe no matter how successful you are in any area of your life, you still have so much room to grow in that area and other areas of your life.
And that's true. I mean, I don't know how many men are actually talking about this. And, let's just start with purpose, because you mentioned that and you said 5 out of 100. And I was just laughing because I'm like, is it really that high?
Yeah, probably not. I was trying to be generous, but you're probably right. It's probably 1.
And that in itself is a big thing. Do you have an exercise, or how do you help people to find their purpose?
We do. In fact, each of our months, Unravel is a 12-month environment that is men meet once a month for 3 hours, but it's the work they do outside of that month that is critical to getting everything they need to get out of the group. So we have an entire month dedicated to that very thing, to how to create this mission statement that can be your sort of barometer and your orientation to life as you move forward. We also actually do a retreat at some point during the 12 months. And that retreat, we spend essentially an entire day giving men a framework to walk through to discover that for themselves. So it's not, I wish it obviously was like a one question or one sentence kind of thing, but it's an entire framework that men go through. And that from the work you do, it's a process to come up with something like that. And it's different for different people. It needs to be something men own. I tell people, look, if you have one and you look at it and you're not really living it, or at least orienting toward it and moving in that direction, then come up with something different, because that's not really driving you.
And that makes a lot of sense. I'm just wondering, I know when I work with people who want to go through that process, I usually take about 3 months, sometimes longer, to get through it. Simply because what I find is if you rush through it, they pick what they think they want. But if they actually chew on it for a while and they spend some time and then they start seeing other people's plans, they start to realize, oh, I didn't know that was possible, or I thought I wanted this, but it really wasn't what I wanted. And so I get the feeling it takes time, but maybe you found a faster way.
You know what? I'll tell you what's one of the keys to us making a huge impact on someone having, let's call it a draft statement at the end of the retreat and the month that we spend on it, is part of what we do is we have a system for looking at backward patterns in our lives, current patterns in our life, and forward thinking patterns that we want to have in our life moving forward. And it's interesting in going through that process in a structured way that we have men go through, begins to come clear to you at least what you need to change, which then informs, to a degree. We also have a month that we spend on, where's your area of giftedness? Like, what are you just naturally wired to be good at? And how can you lean into that more? So those things combined, it's not perfect. It's a work in process, but men come out with a very strong draft that they then obviously spend the rest of their life tweaking and working on. I mean, I've certainly, made changes to mine over time.
And that's the other thing that I sometimes find is people think that they're writing on stone tablets.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
well
no,
said.
this is paper.
Yeah.
You can change it. And to be totally honest, about every 10 years, you're probably not the person you were.
Yeah, that's true.
And so you're probably going to need to change it. Plus, there are seasons in life, right? There's seasons of romance and courting. There's seasons of young kids. There's seasons of older kids.
Mm-hmm.
There's seasons of grown kids. There's seasons of growing at work. There's seasons of reaping at work.
Mm-hmm.
Like all of these different things kind of come together.
Yeah.
And at different points in life, you have different things. So it's figuring that out and being okay with the change and understanding that that's just normal.
Yeah, that's a great point. We are changing ourselves. So why wouldn't we expect that we need to constantly revisit and make changes to, statements or kind of directional things we've established in our life in terms of where we want to go and what we want to do.
One of the things I've noticed, because I noticed you mentioned fitness, a lot of the bigger touted men's groups seem to be very, pound on the chest, yelling, screaming, and your manlyhood is about how strong you are.
Mm.
What kind of approach do you guys take with fitness and that part of it?
It's interesting because one of our themes is for men to be able to come into our groups without any preconceived ideas of what activities, what sports, what vocation, what anything that they need to be engaged in. So they don't feel like they need to, have a certain set of hobbies or activities that qualify them to be in a group. So that's kind of point number one to that. Point number two is that when men come into our groups, part of what we do is we really focus on the transcendent principles that help us make progress in our life. And the way that we orient toward physical activities is not one of those transcendent principles. And when I say physical activities, I'm talking about sports and hobbies. So those are fun and they're great. And if that's a way that you develop yourself physically, so you stay fit and in shape and healthy, that's great. But it's not really a transcendent principle that's going to the actual act of it. Now, the discipline and the muscle behind that, of course, but it's not really one of those things. So we try to reorient men's thinking to what it means to be a man and to really grow as a man. You touched on earlier, not being in touch with emotions and our emotions and stuff like that. That's very common for us, obviously. So, that's an area we want men to be more connected to and to recognize that what you see in a movie or a TV show isn't necessarily, there's more to it than that. And certainly that may be a part, maybe it's not a part, depending on what you enjoy doing, but there's so much more to it than that. So we really try to get men thinking about something different than that. And that's the challenge oftentimes with the highly emotional things. I remember when I was younger, growing up in business, I went to, I think every, well-known motivational seminar, experience, whatever you want to call them, productive for sure. And lots of great things came out of that and interesting habits and such. One of the things I noticed, though, they tend to be very emotional experiences, like you're alluding to, with a lot of men's group. And emotional experiences are great for that moment, but they fade pretty quickly when the reality of life hits you a week, 2 weeks, a month later. So it takes something a lot more than that emotional experience. And that's what we want to get men calibrated to.
Well, you have to consistently do it.
Yeah.
And so it can't be about excitement of the moment. And the other thing I find, everybody seems to want the 30 days to whatever, or the 90 days or, these types of things. And the reality is life is not 30 days.
Yeah. I'm glad you actually said that because it reminds me, I recall that one of the things that I think a word that you use that resonates with me is yet, right? It's you don't know yet. Instead of saying you don't know something, you don't know yet. And that's another way to kind of say what we're about at Unravel. It's not the finals chapter. We're trying to get men oriented to, and kind of back to the mission statement. It's just, let's expose a person to that. Let's get something down that you can start to work toward, right? If it's finances and vocation and things like that, let's start. Let's make a step forward and start to develop the muscle, get people around you that will help you move forward. So that you're right. There is so much today that's like, how quickly can I get this done? And I know when I was young in business, fell victim to that so many times. Like, I'm just looking for the easy way, the quick win. And that's just not reality. It just doesn't work that way. Nothing good comes easy. It's hard work.
It is hard work, and it is a commitment, and it's a lifelong way of doing things.
Mm-hmm.
Is the reality of it. And when it comes to diet and fitness and growth and all of these different areas, they all take time to kind of come together. And it's funny because I noticed one of the things you sent, you talked about mastering work-life harmony. Most people say work-life balance.
Mm-hmm.
What made you choose harmony over balance? Was there intention there, or?
Yeah, and there is. And let me just say first, sometimes I'll still use the phrase work-life balance, but the intention behind that is to recognize that there's not like this perfect balance that we achieve, in my experience, in my opinion, in all areas of our life. So if we have these key areas of our life that we think are important, we don't really find this balance and we land there. It's evolving, it's changing. We go through seasons where one element may be more important, and we need to devote more time to than another season. But when you think about the word harmony, to me, that denotes something that is really working together. So it's really trying to get all of these important areas of our life so that they're working together, moving us in a positive direction.
That makes a lot of sense. And I've become a very big fan of the word harmony, and we use it a lot. I don't see it used a lot, and that's kind of why I called it out, because it isn't the norm of how people talk about this. They tend to talk about balance, and nobody can get balanced. Like it's an unattainable goal.
Yeah.
And so it becomes a struggle.
I also find it, to your point, I find it sometimes kind of debilitating for me, because when I hear the balance, okay, you find this balance, I feel like there's this perfect cocktail, this perfect formula that I'm striving to achieve. And then I find I never really get there. And it's discouraging, because I'm thinking, well, I guess I can't really, do what needs to be done to achieve that balance in my area. But instead I can look and know that there are times in my life where I'm going to have to maybe cheat one area more than another, because it's the right thing to do at the right time. But that doesn't mean that that's out of harmony. There's still those areas, hopefully, are still working in harmony to, move the ball down the field.
Do you ever find that men fail within your program to achieve, or?
We do. In fact, one of the things that we really believe, that the vast majority of us as men, we don't really have an environment that really challenges us to be excellent, pursue excellence in everything we do. We really believe that the vast majority of men, it's like the emperor's new clothes. They're walking around and people are telling them they got a beautiful robe on, but in reality, they don't. And so we do. And part of the way we model that is we will have periodically a guy in a group who isn't showing up, prepared. And this isn't something you just show up and say, oh, sorry, I was busy this past month. I didn't have time to do it. So we try to model healthy communication, which is a conversation where the leader will call and say, hey, you weren't prepared. Let's talk about that. Maybe this isn't the right time for you. Or what are you going to do to make that different next time? That's fine. There's grace and there's room for growth, as long as the person goes, oh man, wow, I see you're serious. I can't just show up unprepared. We have a crucial conversation. They decide to get prepared next time. That's great. But if they don't, then we're having a conversation that's going, hey, maybe the time's not right for you right now. So, I guess that would be a form of failing in the group. I think certainly it is. It's also a indicator for them that they really aren't ready to pursue the growth that they think they're ready for. And what's really cool, Rocky, is when we have men later on who come back from that experience and then sign up for a later group. And then they really learn from that and they're really all in and committed and they really grow. So it's a learning experience. They may not learn it immediately, but hopefully they learn it down the road.
Today's episode is sponsored by Profit Answer Man Podcast. Did you know that most small business owners hate looking at their financials? It's one reason they may struggle with business success. The Profit Answer Man podcast helps them ensure they are profitable and can pay their employees and weather the storms we all have to face. It's built on the Profit First methodology of pay yourself first. The Profit Answer Man podcast is a must listen to for every small business owner and anyone who wants to help them survive and thrive. Check it out on your favorite listening platform. And not everybody's ready for this journey.
Yeah, you're right. You're right on with that.
And I think it's being okay with that and learning to say, yeah, that's all right. You're not ready. Thank you, but no thank you. And that's not always easy to do.
It's not. And I found it to be very discouraging in men's groups that I would be in, or any group for that matter, when like we would show up and there was this expectation and then some of the people wouldn't meet it. And then it was as if nothing had occurred. And then it causes me to want to go, well, I guess you really don't mean that. And it's still my responsibility if I don't show up prepared, but it certainly made it easier for me to not show up prepared in environments like that. And so I really appreciate when people have those conversations and go, hey, you're not really pursuing that with excellence. And I feel like I learned some hard lessons of that early in my career and still learn them, of course. But the concept of that you've got to show up prepared, again, learned some hard lessons early on that I'm really grateful for. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. Yeah, to me, the faith part, and we are faith-based. Everything we do is faith-based for sure. It's not a requirement or prerequisite for someone to have any faith orientation to be in Unravel. We're excited for men who aren't coming from a faith background to be in it because they're going to get exposed to principles and truth, transcendent principles that come from faith. And we're excited for them to learn that, but it's not a requirement by any stretch. What's interesting about that is when you've heard me talk about these 5 F's, the faith part is a little different. It's certainly not one that is in equal footing with the others. From our vantage point, the faith really wraps around the other F's, right? Everything else falls underneath that or inside of that, if you will. So that when you're pursuing your finances, when you're pursuing your fitness, your friends, your family, and you're trying to have healthy relationships in that regard, you're doing it within the context of your faith. And that's what we want men to, one of the things we want men to understand and realize. If you're doing it outside of that context, then here's what you need to understand are the consequences, the ramifications, the side effects of that. If you do it within the context of your faith, here's the benefit of doing that. So that's a big part of what we want men to understand is pursuing these things outside of the context of your faith is going to yield a sense of an emptiness, right? And the stories are endless of successful people that have made all the money, they have all the wealth and fame, et cetera, and they're empty, right? And we want men to understand that's important.
How much is vulnerability part of these groups and the conversations?
Man, that's no one's ever asked me that before. And that's interesting because vulnerability has always been one of my challenges, being, vulnerable. Certainly earlier on, I guess more so in my, growing up in business and life, more so than now, but still, still a challenge. And because I think oftentimes as men, we feel like we can't be vulnerable and show that, wow, that hurt emotionally, or I'm struggling with this, whatever that thing happens to be. And we have a high value for vulnerability. In fact, in our groups, you're going to experience that because you're going to be challenged to make progress in ways that you haven't before. which is going to require either being vulnerable about why that was hard, vulnerable about why you weren't quite able to make the progress you wanted to. It is built into the DNA of our groups. You will learn to be more vulnerable by the time you're finished with Unravel.
And I think for a lot of men, talking about feelings and emotions is a struggle. It's not the way we were taught or raised, especially back in the day, right?
You're right. Yeah, you're exactly right. It was not something that we were taught, and I think it's when as men can become more aware of how that's important, necessary for them to be more effective as a man and a leader, then they embrace that more. And having the tools to do that is obviously a huge part of it.
And that makes sense. I look at the family and friends, and to me, that kind of falls in the relationship bucket.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And I've heard lots of stories that as people get older, they forget how to make friends or they stop making friends. And so they don't really keep that going on. And even within your families, do you take the time to continue to build the relationships and so forth? So what are you teaching people to help them to be better in those areas?
Yeah, that's a great point, because it is easy. It's easy to just to fall into the status quo in, every area of our life. Yeah, that's for sure. So one of the things we do is we really help men learn to have crucial conversations. Okay. And that's oftentimes around, I have this need that's not getting met, or, you're crossing a boundary, that's important to me. There's a whole range of things, but people just don't know how to have the conversations. And Rocky, when people leave Unravel, they really learn to have those conversations. So now that they're equipped to sit down with a family member or a friend and say, man, I love you. I want to spend more time with you. And here's something we need to talk about to make progress in that. I think that's a big impediment. I really feel like, for the most part, that we are wired in a way where we want to have and need to have relationships. And so when we don't have those, particularly with people that we're close to, there's something we feel inside of us. It feels like a loss. It feels empty. It feels less than. And oftentimes we just don't know where to start. So that's what we want to do, is equipment, so they have the tool and tools to be able to do that. And that starts with being able to have good conversations with people about what you need, and then also what they need.
Is Crucial Conversations similar to the book of the same title?
Absolutely. It is the book, Kerry Patterson. It's one of the books that we do in Unravel, is Crucial Conversations.
Okay. Yeah, I'm familiar with the book and how to have these difficult conversations. It's funny. These are all the things we really weren't taught in school, right?
Yeah. No one taught us anything about that in school. How was that missed in any school, but especially like business school where I was? How was that missed to have crucial conversations with people? It's so important. And it's oftentimes not something our families, like our parents, are necessarily have a framework for. I say a framework. They have little bits and pieces. Some they do well, some they don't do well. And my wife and I's parents certainly fall in that category. Having a framework, that's one of the things that's great about the book, is it does give you a framework for having those conversations more effectively.
Are there other books you use in the program?
Yeah, we've got a whole bunch of books we use. In fact, that's one of the foundations of our environment, is drawing from great thinkers, great communicators, great writers, and information that they have assimilated. And I believe, Rock, I don't know how you feel about this. There's not a lot of new information out there, really. It's just kind of a recapitulation or a reassembly or restating of timeless truths that are out there, maybe packaging in a way that resonates with us, that didn't in another way. So we're trying to draw from those to teach these fundamental skills to men that are out there. But the average person, I don't remember when I had the first Unravel group back in 2016. I think I looked in, and the average person, I think, read 1.5 books a year. And in Unravel, you're going to read a lot more books than that. And that's going to be a new habit you're going to develop, which in and of itself is helpful.
I think I do one a week.
Nice. That's great, man. You're way above the average at one a week. That's fantastic. Well,
Well, and it's something I developed later in life. When I was young, well, actually, I did. I used to read when I was young, but it wasn't, it was more fiction.
fiction. Yes. Yeah. Okay. Well, it's a habit that men need to develop. Everyone needs to develop. We're talking about men here, obviously, but it's a habit that we need to develop because there's so much great information out there to help us, make the changes that we need to make. And here's the thing, I'll just say this. Another reason I started Unravel is because learning to read, younger in business, I realized that I get a great idea or two or three or maybe more, but it's hard to scale those and sustain those outside of a group environment. I'm too easy to talk myself out of things that I need to do and should do. But if I'm in a group, that's much harder to do. So that's the value of the group. As you know, you're in groups. That's the value is one of the values is you have men who are on this journey with you. And it's harder to talk yourself out of doing the things that you need to do.
Do you find that after men spend a year with you and maybe a little bit beyond that, that they start looking around and going, who are these people I'm hanging out with? I don't know that I want to hang out with them anymore.
It's so interesting you say that because, it does cause men to take a serious inventory of the people they're spending time with. We actually have an Unravel Part 2 that's a 6-month environment after Unravel 1 that's exclusively focused on leadership. Then after that, we have an Unravel Part 3 that is a small group environment that is meant to be a lifelong group for men to continue to grow and explore. And it does. We hear men all the time going, wow, I'm starting to realize some of the people I was hanging around weren't necessarily bringing me down. Oh, that's part of it too, but they're not going anywhere. They're not looking to make progress at all. And it's just this echo chamber that they were living in of this everything bouncing back that what they wanted to hear to begin with. So it is interesting to see that occur.
What kind of success have you seen people achieve after going through the program?
If you think about these 5S we've been talking about, we have seen men's and have testimonials, and it's fun to even on our website, we have some great testimonials. It's funny to see, it's exciting rather to see the life change that occurs in every aspect of that. We have men that were on no faith journey and suddenly are excited about being on a faith journey. We have men that were struggling with an addiction, and we're certainly not a replacement for an addiction program, but men that were struggling with an addiction and suddenly have made progress in that. Men who were struggling as husbands. We have testimonials from so many wives going, thank you so much for what you guys are doing on Unravel. My husband is a different man now. He's a different leader, a different father to our children. And that's part of what makes it so rewarding, Rocky, is just seeing these testimonials, these stories of life change that we get to be a part of. It's really cool.
I know I have spent a crap ton of money on self-improvement.
Mm-hmm.
I know many of my guests have spent 6-7 figures on that.
Mm-hmm.
And I know for a lot of people, that creates a massive barrier in the sense that they can't afford to go through all this self-development. So they're stuck with a book. Joining a 12-month program might be extremely expensive in a lot of these groups. How do you handle that?
Yeah, well, that's a great point. And for Unravel groups, it's $120 for a man to be a part of for a year. So it's very affordable. And if someone can't afford that, then we ask them a series of questions that they provide answers to us for. And if they really can't afford it, we have a scholarship for men. So there's really no financial barrier for someone participating in. First off, 99% of the people can afford $120 for a year to be in the group, plus the cost of any books that they buy. But if they can't, we provide them a scholarship and pay for it for them. We just want to make sure they're committed. $120 is a big part of that. It's just to know that they're invested in it. And we used to do them and not have a charge for it. Men did it for free, but we found that men having some investment in it is really, it's beneficial to them.
Yeah, I can't see anyone not being able to afford $10 a month.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a minuscule price to pay for what you're actually offering. So how do you run a business at $10 a month?
Yeah, that's a great point, and it's part of as we. I can't remember. I think I mentioned earlier in our time together that the 501c3 itself was just formed in 2022. So at this point, we rely on donations. So I mean, obviously we make it easier for people to give on the website. That's what we rely on at this point in time. We are in a season right now where we're going, okay, long term to really scale, we want to reach 1 million men in 10 years. It's probably going to take more than donations. So we continue to explore ways to create more revenue streams that will further that mission. So, for example, we've learned that a year is a big commitment for men who don't have some connection to a man that's already been through Unravel. And so we have 2 easy on-ramps now that are 6 sessions. They're self-paced. They're not in a group. They're individual. They're $20 each. They're called Unravel Labs. And we've got these contents like excellence is one of them, how to pursue excellence. Men can pay $20. They get a taste for what we're about. Then they can join the full 12-month if they want to at that point. So we're going to continue to create additional content and continue to play around with that sort of formula and mixture of generating revenue that's also helps us continue to provide affordable content for men, and all providing on-ramps to ultimately the group experience. So we're still experimenting with that, but right now, donations. That's it. Donations is what's funding us, and that's certainly something that we're grateful for when we receive donations from people to help us further that mission.
What haven't we talked about that we should have?
Oh, that's interesting. What have we not talked about? I feel like there's so many things you and I could talk about for hours to come. I think you know this from all the experiences you've had in life, that I think you have listeners right now that feel stuck in some area of their life. They're not going to get unstuck without taking a step forward and doing something different than they've been doing to this point. They have to do something different. And I would say that figure out a next step that's going to resonate with you and take that next step that's different than any of the steps you've taken previously, because they haven't been working in that area at least.
And at the end of the day, you have to take action. And that is the one thing that I have found that most people tend not to do is to take the action.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, you take one step at a time, and maybe it's perfect and maybe it's imperfect.
Yeah.
And maybe it's the wrong way. But I found once I get moving, things tend to happen.
There you go.
When I don't move, then I get stuck for a long, long time. And I know in my younger life, I spent a lot of time kind of being stuck.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of this stuff has changed. I mean, you're essentially relatively young still, 8 years into this. 20, 30 years ago, I think trying to find something like this was almost impossible.
Yeah.
And here it is reasonable. So people should, if it makes sense for them, then it works. Do you have an age requirement from the younger side?
Well, men need to at least be past college age. If you're still 18, 19, you just haven't had enough life experiences for our content to resonate. So at least, it's not like if someone's 21, we're going to say, oh, you're not 22. But ideally, a person is at least in their early 20s. If someone was a teenager, we would say, it's just a little premature. Our content's not going to resonate with you. But we like for men to be in their early 20s at the youngest.
And I'm assuming there's no upper age limit.
No upper age limit at all. We've had men in their 70s in Unravel in the past.
Finally, right?
Yeah, right.
It's good for
That's right. Better late than never.
Better late than never. You got to show up and make it happen.
Mm-hmm.
It's time to learn the secrets of life. What's your secret to living an abundant life?
I would say understanding you can have almost anything you want, but not everything you want. So learning to make trade-off choices in all aspects of your life.
And everything is a choice. And not making a choice is a choice. You'll get what you're served then, because you didn't say yes and you didn't say no, or you didn't pick where you were going to go.
Yeah, that's right.
What did you learn later in life that you wish you would have learned sooner?
Now, there's so many things. One example that I learned later in life, I wish I learned sooner, was to be more curious, sincerely, not weaponized curiosity, but sincere curiosity about other people's feelings and life experiences, and to really want to understand at a really intimate level, what's behind that.
And I think that's actually the secret to building relationships
Yeah.
is being more interested than interesting. Too often
Mhm.
we want to make ourselves interesting and we're not very interested.
Right. And I think too, to really like drill a little deeper in the curiosity about things that didn't make sense to me, either emotionally, relationally, or practically, or whatever. Like, it's easy to be curious about things that you find interesting already, or that resonate, or you get, or you agree with. That's another important one. But to be curious about things you disagree with, or don't resonate, or you don't understand, that's an entirely different thing. And that's the piece that I wish that I had learned younger in life.
It's a lot of sense. If you were to give an 18-year-old one specific piece of wisdom, what would it be?
An 18-year-old, one specific piece: walk with wise people. That's it. That's what I would give. If I only had one thing I could say to them: you need to find wise people in your life, and you need to be around them. If you ask them, they will give you time. Maybe not everyone, but enough will give you time. Ask, be intentional about being around wise people. And they don't have to be wise in every area of their life. I mean, I'm not sure, many people are in that regard, but wise in at least an area of their life that you can learn from and grow from. That's would be, I think, the biggest piece I would give someone, a young person.
And it's also learning to discern who exactly is wise.
Boy, that's a whole nother conversation. Then that I've had so many conversations with my young friends about that. There's an art form to that. People just don't know how to discern whether someone's wise or not. They go by what they say instead of the tangible things. But you're right. That's a part of that, is being discerning.
It's a big part.
Yeah.
If people would like to learn more about Unravel, how can they do that?
People should go to unravelgroups.com/richer soul. We have a welcome page specifically for your listeners at unravelgroups.com/richer soul. And they can learn more about Unravel Groups there and all the offerings that we have.
Awesome. And we'll put that in the show notes. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Rocky. It's really been good spending time with you, visiting with you, and learning. Yeah, thanks a million.
You're most welcome. As a man or woman, are you confident in all areas of your life? Can you have tough conversations? Do you have clarity in what you want and a path to get there? Whether it's Unravel Groups or something else, figure it out for you and take action. Life is short, and wandering around isn't a smart way to live it. What other men do you know who need to hear this episode? Would you do me a favor and share it with them? I would appreciate that. Next week, it's Jason Silver to talk about Your Grass is Greener. Thanks for listening. Have an abundant week.